And welcome back to the Hot Lap. We are talking the final day of testing. So let's get into the news of that final day of testing. So as you know, Ferrari Fastest, you can see the times as you're looking at it to the left or right of me, depending on where you're looking at the screen. To the left of me, yep. Yeah, okay, moving on. We're also talking about Mercedes not quite being ready yet, at least according to Hamilton. But they didn't look too bad, did they? Gary Anderson from the race on who is the fastest. It makes for quite interesting reading. We'll get into that article. LeClerc pretty much saying, don't expect Ferrari to be too great. Red Bull, still the fastest. Yeah, I think we all knew that anyway, but still. Alonso saying 19 other drivers know they're not going to win the championship. Pretty much including Perez, I think. So it's just Verstappen, isn't it? And last but not least, we'll have a big comment on all those drain issues as well. But let's get into the testing times. As you can just about see here, Charles LeClerc is fastest. George Russell second. Both of them, though, interestingly, on the C4 tyre. Zhou on the C4. Verstappen 4 tenths down from the fastest Leclerc. But on the C3 tyre, and most significantly, on old C3 tyres. So it shows you the absolute dominance that, well, the potential dominance, at least, that Red Bull could have. Alex Albon 6th in the Williams on the C4 tyre, 6 tenths down. Oscar Piastri, 7 tenths down with the McLaren. Alonso, 8 tenths down with the Aston Martin. Carlos Sainz is 9th, 9 tenths down. Most of these people are doing the C3 tyre. Interestingly, it says here Lewis Hamilton on the C5 and 12th, but I'm not sure. I don't know if Mercedes bought any C5, but okay. Nico Hülkenberg 11th, 1.3 down. Hamilton 12th, 1.6 down. Unlucky for some, Lance Stroll in 13th, 1.7 down. Then we had, rounding down, is 14th Norris, 15th Gasly, 16th Magnussen, 17th Ocon, 18th Bottas, 19th Ricciardo. Yeah, so, I mean, it was an interesting day, wasn't it? Let's say. But all the cars looked not too bad. I think it was a bit of a, not quite a disaster. McLaren definitely didn't do as much running as they can. They had kind of like, it reminded me of Williams' first day when they just seemed to have issues. But the McLaren did look consistent. And I think the general consensus is, and we will probably end up doing a video over the weekend about it. The general consensus, I think, is McLaren, Mercedes and Ferrari seem to be in like a pack, potentially with Ferrari in the at front, most people feel. Red Bull easily out in the lead, and then you've kind of got Aston Martin, and then after that it's, well, maybe like RB, Alpine, Williams, and then Haas potentially, and Stake is kind of in the mix above Williams and Haas, but it's really, really difficult. But we'll get in all those numbers on another video. I just want to get into the main headlines, and next up we have Lewis Hamilton pretty much saying Mercedes not yet where we want to be. But, and here's the big caveat, but I think Mercedes have had their best test since 2021. Their 22 and 23 cars look absolutely disastrous in Bahrain. So the German manufacturer, it says here, has obviously, as we know, revamped their car, completely changed their concept in a bid to try and catch Red Bull. Now, the early running of the W15, it says, seems to indicate that the Mercedes have dialed out many of the issues that they had. Hamilton describing it as a spiteful rear end. But Hamilton has also suggested that the pace is not quite there yet. He said, we know we've got work to do and we're not yet where we want to be. We knew that that would be the case coming into the test, though. He went on to say, saying, we've got a great platform to build on. We'll go away and work hard over the next couple of days to go through all the data from the test. He says, I'm really excited for the start of the season next week, and we'll be heading into it in good shape. Russell also said that Mercedes was in no doubt that Red Bull remained out in front based on that impressive pace of the RB20, but felt his own outfit was in much better shape than they were 12 months ago. So let's hope that Mercedes have a platform that they can work with going into the new season and beyond. Next up, we've got a really interesting article on Gary Anderson's track verdict on every 2024 car. Now, bear in mind, this was written yesterday, so I don't think it's going to take into account any of the times today. But let's see. Let's get rid of that advert there. We've got Red Bull. He's got here, and he's basically said, even on the race runs, he said, you can see how strong Red Bull is in terms of the corner speed that can be carried. He said there were times on Thursday when Perez was a little conservative on turning and pickup understeer, but generally the car looks to be working better than it was Wednesday morning. It's certainly not looking like a car you'd want to bet against, he concludes. Mercedes, he said it doesn't look too bad, but it does look a little unstable. It had relatively sharp turning, he said, characteristics during that Thursday morning stint. That's something you normally associate with low fuel runs, but the pace indicated they were on much higher fuel. He concluded that there's no reason for panic, and the Mercedes looks like it's up there in the group chasing Red Bull, but not necessarily at the front of it, and that could be key for Mercedes, at least going into Bahrain. Now with Ferrari, he has said that when the Ferrari wasn't hitting drain covers yet, which it did while I was watching Turn 11, it was looking like a good, consistent car. But he said, but just as it doesn't grab me from a technical perspective, the same is true by how it looks on the track. He concluded that after last year, the main thing is for the car to be consistent with a good front end and stable rear. And it looks like it has that. But as Sainz said, it doesn't quite have the edge of grip that Red Bull does. Now on to McLaren, who didn't have a very good test today, but he says the McLaren looks sharp on turning, but generally seems to avoid picking up too much understeer mid-corner. And importantly, looks fairly consistent. So I think we can all agree that McLaren have had a much better test, kind of like Mercedes, than they had this time last year. And he said about the McLaren, that means it's one of the better cars in terms of feeding in the throttle at the exit. It looks absolutely like a car in that chasing group behind Red Bull. Aston Martin, the people that improved most last year, he said whether in the hands of Alonso or Stroll, it looks like a sensible car. He seems to say that the drivers carry the speed, traction good, they can feed that power, and he said it's difficult to say how quick it is, but like last year's car, at this point in the season, Gary said it's working well. Now the Alpine, every time I've seen the Alpine turn 11, it looks like a new experience for a driver. So he says not very consistent. He's saying it isn't doing anything particularly wrong. It just looks like a car that's lacking in downforce, needed to be in the top half of the field. So not much change there for Alpine. At least I don't think they looked any worse than this time last year. But yeah, Williams, okay. He said the Williams doesn't look like the most connected car when watching Logan Sargent on his race run, but he said the car eventually rotated reasonably well and he was able to get back on that power. So it seems fairly consistent based on the way it looked on a reasonable fuel load. RB, yeah, the former AlphaTauri Toro Rosso / Minardi, if you know, you know. So he said, when I first saw the RB on Wednesday morning, it looked a little unstable. You could see the rear moving and the driver tried to apply the throttle mid-corner and it made it quite difficult. He said, but on Thursday, it's been far more convincing. It turns in well, reasonable grip and generally can carry the speed. So a thumbs up there, looking a lot better than they did last year. But he mentioned that there's a bit of understeer, which kind of delays the driver getting on that throttle. Now, Sauber or Stake, it's relatively lively on turning, said Gary, when the car does what the driver wants. The speed's carried well, but there are times when it goes wrong. He said he spotted a couple of tiny lockups that led to Bottas running wide on Thursday afternoon, but he said this looks like a perfectly decent place for Sauber to work from. So yeah, positive notes from Sauber. Finally, Haas, he said you have to say Haas is generally doing what the driver wants, reasonably responsive and consistent, which is good. I mean, Haas came out in their launch and said they think they're the slowest, potentially the slowest car. Gary's just saying it doesn't look like a huge amount of grip. And the technical director was saying earlier that the car seems to be a step forward, which should be good for, which should be good for those tyres. And that's the one big thing that's kind of plagued Ferrari, but really, really over the last 3 or 4 years has really plagued Haas. So Gary concluded about the Haas, this looks like a good, solid car that's not doing untoward. It just needs to be quicker. So that's Mr. Gary's take on which I thought was quite interesting. I think it's about where most people think. Now here's Leclerc basically talking about Red Bull from racefans.net remains quite a bit ahead. He said Ferrari, as we know, have had the fastest time during these 2 days of testing, but dear old Charles has said it hasn't closed the gap to Red Bull. He said, my initial feeling is that Red Bull unfortunately remains quite a bit ahead. And that's what he told the official F1 channel during the test. His teammate had the best pace today on a 1:29.9. That was yesterday, as in Thursday. But Max Verstappen had comfortably set the quickest lap with on C3 tyres on the first day of the test and has done today. And LeClerc talking about it. Yesterday they've done impressive times, LeClerc acknowledged, but this is only my own feeling, not looking at the data, because again, data doesn't mean much for now. He said, for now it's too early to say. We have no idea what the levels of fuel are with everybody else. But he's quite good. He's encouraged by improvements Ferrari have made to this new SF24. In terms of drivability, he said the car is a lot better compared to last year. And he said last year after the test, it was very difficult to push into our direction because we didn't know what the car was doing. We would get into a corner and we didn't know whether we will have extreme oversteer or understeer, which was a big problem. So this year is not like that. It's a much better starting point, and LeClerc is a lot happier with this year's Ferrari test. It seems to be a lot of teams had a much better test this year than last year, probably because they're getting on top of those regulations, despite the fact that I think they think they're very much not as fast as Red Bull. Talking about not as fast as Red Bull, Alonso has come out, this is from motorsport.com, and basically said 19 drivers already know they won't win the 2024 F1 title. Yes, doom and gloom from Alonso. He reckons the AMR 24 marks an improvement over last year, which is a thumbs up, but he's reluctant to say the team will repeat its flying start for 2023. However, the two-time champion believes that reigning constructors Red Bull will be another step ahead, given the surprisingly extensive changes that Red Bull have done. And as such, Alonso believes Max Verstappen is going to be world champion. He said, I think Max is the world champion and Red Bull is dominating the sport. Also, the concept that they presented this year, it's also a surprise. At the moment, he said, we just have to watch and see how they perform. He pretty much concluded saying, I think 19 drivers in the paddock now will think that they will not win the championship. It happens 99% of the time in your career. This is a brutal sport. Yes, it is. So, Verstappen for champ. Yeah. And last but not least, I just want to get into the fact that Formula 1 drivers want more pre-event checks on drain covers. Drain covers has been an issue which none of us thought would happen. Bear in mind, this track has been around since 2004, has had many cars run over the curbs, albeit, even I think Adrian Newey came out, and with these ground effect cars, they suck themselves to the ground a lot more, and those drain covers have become potentially a victim of these faster cars. Thursday was alright, and Verstappen suspects the current generation of cars, as we just said, may be contributing to this drain cover gate issue. He said with the ground effect cars, probably it's a little worse, but also it seems like we're driving in places that not a lot of other cars are going in terms of opening up corners. And a lot of drivers, I think both Hamilton as well and Ferrari have come out and said that this needs to be sorted. And I imagine between now and practice, which will be on a Thursday, the Bahrain circuit is definitely going to nail down those drain covers. Okay, that's pretty much it for this final day of testing update. We will be back though, analysing those testing times, analysing those race one times over the weekend and trying to guess who is it going to be fastest. So stay tuned. If you made it to the end, like and subscribe. You are an amazing person. Thank you so much. You're a world champion if you do that. If you do two of them, like, subscribe, made it to the end, comment. You're a multiple world champion in our eyes. We'll speak to you soon. Thank you.